Hi, I'm William Seymour, and I'm going to be presenting the results of a study undertaken with my colleague Max van Cleek at the University of Oxford on the interactions between trust, anthropomorphism, and relationship development in voice assistants. People have been fascinated with computers that can talk for decades. Science fiction has many notable examples of this, from the machine invention Metropolis to Asimov's writing on humaniform robots. These authors and others like them explored the benefits and the drawbacks of interacting with machines that mimic human thought and conversation. Meanwhile, researchers also began to explore the potential for these systems, such as Weizenbaum's ELIZA. More recently, Google unveiled Duplex, a system capable of making phone calls that are sufficiently convincing as to come across as human. One of the extraordinary things that happens when voice assistants speak to us is that they activate the same parts of the brain as a human speaker would. Work by Knapp and others showed that people follow social rules with computers and apply stereotypes to them as if they were talking to a person, despite the fact that they know their conversation partner is a computer. This is closely related to anthropomorphism, the tendency to ascribe human characteristics to animals and inanimate objects, something that's been closely studied in the context of human-robot interaction. This isn't a new phenomenon with technology, and for a long time we've been designing and using devices like the Tamagotchi and parotherapeutic robots that are specifically intended to have these effects, and voice assistants continue this trend. Beyond this, we've also seen devices like smartphones be characterized as comfort blankets or pacifiers, with connected technology also giving rise to parasocial relationships between users, influencers, and virtual personalities. It's apparent that the use of conversation and speech changes the way that we interact with computers, and this is at least partly related to the way that humans tend towards anthropomorphism. But what isn't clear from prior work is whether the addition of speech to computers represents a deeper shift in our relationship with the technology that we use, perhaps more akin to the development seen in interpersonal relationships than in our attachment to inanimate objects. So, in this work, we set out to explore whether these relationships follow the same patterns that we see in relationships between people, and how this might fit into what we already know about how people trust and anthropomorphise their devices. But how do we measure human relationships? There are several models of relationships between humans that take on different structures. Focusing here on stage models, two main examples are Altman and Taylor's theory of social penetration and Knapp's staircase model of relationship development. The former characterizes relationships in terms of breadth and depth, the different areas of our lives and the extent to which we share them with people. Knapp also adopted a tiered approach with the staircase model, where people move up and down levels of intimacy over time. Often, our relationships stay on the outskirts of these models, with only a few warranting the effort to be developed further. We created a survey to measure the correlations between trust, anthropomorphism, and relationship development based on 3 existing inventories drawn from the literature. We used 15 questions from a previously validated survey on trust and decision support systems. We also adapted work by Welch and Rubin, who operationalized Knapp's staircase model of human interpersonal relationships, matching each stage to behaviors typical of relationships at that level. After replacing references to partners with Alexa, we ran 2 pilot surveys to identify questions that were clearly inappropriate in the context of the study, such as exchanging physical tokens of affection, and this left 15 questions on relationship development. Finally, we included word association questions from Laumann and Haslam's work on anthropomorphization, with 10 traits for each of human nature, traits unique to humans, and robots, with some refinements identified in prior work. I've put some demographic information about our participants on the left-hand side here. We used responses from Alexa owners to calculate the main statistics, and I'll compare those to owners of other assistants later on. The results show that there was a range of responses to the relationship development questions, which had a wider spread than the trust and anthropomorphism scales, as shown in the violin plot here. These answers were also more weighted towards the lower end of the ranges, with the opposite being true for trust and anthropomorphism. We calculated Cronbach's alpha as a measure of internal consistency for each metric, and all of these met or exceeded the threshold for acceptability. Looking back at RQ1, we can tentatively answer that relationship development does make sense in the context of voice assistants. Instead of being rejected, as we've seen with similar social questions in previous research, we see here that the relationship scale attracted a broad range of responses, and that people were able to engage with the questions without finding them too dissonant. Moving on to interactions between survey axes, we can see that there was a strong correlation between trust in an assistant and relationship closeness with it. There were also moderate correlations between human anthropomorphism and both relationship development and trust. Perhaps unsurprisingly, robot anthropomorphism was negatively associated with relationship development. The fact that all three scales broadly increased in unison leads us to answer RQ2, which concerned their correlation, in the affirmative. It also hints at the presence of an underlying factor, although it's unclear from the data that we have what this could be. Answering RQ3 about the influence of secondary characteristics, we saw that the majority of participants used an Alexa registered to their own account, and these people generally had higher relationship development scores than those whose Alexa was administered or purchased by someone else. Trust was also higher for participants who used their own account. Interestingly, it didn't matter how long people had owned their Echo, or how many of them were present in the household. Bringing in results from users of the Google Assistant, we can see that the same correlations are present, and they're of roughly similar magnitude. While we didn't see the correlation between trust and human anthropomorphism replicated, we would expect this to be the case given a larger sample to draw from. What was really interesting, though, was that people who trusted Google Assistant were more likely to assign it robotic or mechanical traits, in stark contrast to the responses from Alexa owners. Across the different survey axes, we see that trust scores and the robotic nature of Alexa are pretty uncontroversial, with less variation across the responses. What differed the most was the extent to which Alexa was treated and interacted with as human. As speech recognition technology develops, voice assistants increasingly skirt the boundary of humanness. Existing research links this to purification work, where people continually redefine mental categories like human and machine in order to keep them separate. An example of this is when people describe jokes told by Alexa as scripted, but those by comedians as showing intent and awareness. In the study, we expected this to cause a bimodal distribution in relationship scores, as people sought to categorize Alexa firmly as either human or machine. But this wasn't the case, perhaps suggesting that after years in the public consciousness, people might have already adjusted to Alexa's nature and undertaken the bulk of this purification work. But if we interact with these devices socially, and to some extent as if they were human, there are a number of pressing ethical concerns that need to be addressed. Given that prior work has already shown how similar interactions can be used to increase information disclosure, and that disclosure plays a key role in the formation of social relationships, there's a clear potential here for voice assistants to manipulate users. This is especially concerning in a sector incentivized to harvest as much information about users as possible. Thinking longer term, the potential interactions between social devices and mechanisms like microtransactions are also concerning, and as a society, we'll have to decide how much to tolerate devices that exploit social processes in this way. Given the inseparability of voice assistants and their associated cloud ecosystems, trust in an assistant should rationally be the same as trust in the vendor who sold it. The results of the study were promising in this respect, with trust in Alexa and Google Assistant moderately correlated with trust in their parent companies. This represents a key difference from interpersonal relationships, where we might trust or respect someone despite their institutional or social affiliations, like trusting a friend who's a used car salesperson. An intuitive explanation for this might be that this is an effect of trust building over time, but the results showed no correlation between ownership duration and any of the survey axes. A more likely explanation is that people who trust Google or Amazon are more likely to buy voice assistants from them in the first place, although prior work has shown that people's mental models of voice assistants often miss online processing of voice recordings. So we open exploration of this complex relationship as an exciting avenue for future work. To conclude, speech is a complex and important affordance for interaction, and the sophistication of software like Alexa shows how far things have progressed since the likes of Eliza. The results of our study show that the use of speech by devices is driving a deeper shift in our relationship with these technologies, towards something more social in nature. This raises important questions around trust, and the extent to which more social connections to technology could be used to surveil and manipulate us. Thank you very much for listening, and please don't hesitate to get in contact with me if you have any questions.